The hum of the airplane filled Anya's ears, steady and mechanical, a rhythm that almost drowned out the echo of her father's last words before she left. Paris may give you freedom, but don't forget who you are. She had smiled bravely then, clutching her boarding pass like a lifeline. But now, 30,000 feet above the ground, the words carried more weight than the small suitcase stowed in the overhead bin. Anya leaned her head against the cold window. Beneath the scattered clouds, cities blinked like constellations, tiny fragments of lives she didn't know. She imagined her own life as one of those flickering lights, fading in India, about to ignite in France. Her chest swelled with anticipation, but also with a sharp pang of fear. She was alone. Truly alone for the first time in her 24 years. The seatbelt dug into her waist as the plane jolted through turbulence. The elderly woman beside her crossed herself, whispering a prayer. Anya closed her eyes, forcing herself to focus on the excitement she had promised herself she would feel. She wasn't just leaving. She was running. From the whispers of neighbors who had called her too ambitious, from relatives who pitied her broken engagement, from the suffocating weight of expectations that had nearly crushed her spirit. Paris, she told herself, would be the beginning of everything. When the plane descended, dawn spilled across the horizon in strokes of pink and gold. The city appeared slowly. First the veins of roads, then the clustering of rooftops, and finally the unmistakable silhouette of the Eiffel Tower, delicate yet commanding. Anya pressed her fingers against the glass, her throat tightening. She had dreamed of this view for years, cutting out magazine photos, hiding them inside old textbooks so her mother wouldn't scold her for being distracted. Now, it was real. Charles de Gaulle Airport buzzed Wamo. As she watched a man pause beneath the lamppost across the street, lighting a cigarette, she wondered if anyone had noticed her arrival. The stranger's gaze lingered upward, briefly meeting hers before he disappeared into the shadows. A shiver ran through her. She turned back inside, telling herself it was nothing, just another Parisian night. But deep inside, unease curled tightly, warning her that freedom often carried a price. The first week in Paris felt like a dream, stitched together by fragments of movie scenes. Anya rose early, drawn to the streets as though they were alive and whispering her name. Cobblestone alleys twisted like secrets. Boulangeries spilled warm scents of butter and sugar, and every corner revealed something unexpected. A mural splashed in defiant colors, a violinist playing with eyes closed, a lover's quarrel spilling into the open air. She told herself she was free here. No one cared about her family name. No one asked why she was unmarried, why she had left. She could be anyone. She could be invisible, or she could shine. But freedom, she quickly realized, carried a sharp loneliness. Her apartment near Montmartre became both a sanctuary and a cage. In the mornings, sunlight spilled across the walls, warming the small space. At night, silence pressed in, reminding her that laughter and conversations drifted from cafes across the street, but none of them belonged to her. She was only an observer, never a participant. Determined not to sink into solitude, she began exploring. She wandered through markets bursting with colors, piles of cherries, stacks of bread, wheels of cheese larger than her suitcase. Vendors shouted in French, words she couldn't quite catch, but their energy wrapped around her like music. She tried speaking back, fumbling with phrases, earning amused smiles and, sometimes, kind patience. On one of these mornings, she felt eyed again, the weight of eyes. A man leaned casually against a flower stall, cigarette in hand, his gaze steady and unhurried. Dark hair, neatly cut, a tailored coat despite the mild spring air. He wasn't staring in the crude way of strangers on trains. It was quieter, more deliberate. Anya's stomach tightened. She told herself it was coincidence. After all, Paris was full of people, too many to notice one young woman among them. She walked faster, turning into a street lined with art shops, her pulse louder than the footsteps echoing behind her. When she glanced back, he was gone. That evening, from her balcony, she saw him again. Same posture, different corner, watching without watching. His cigarette glowed faintly in the dark, an ember floating before the wind swallowed it. Her mind split in two. One side whispered that she was imagining it, fueled by jet lag and loneliness. The other insisted there was intention in the way he appeared, vanished, and reappeared. To calm herself, Anya threw her energy into routines. She visited Sacré-Cœur at dawn, climbing the long steps to watch the city wake. She lingered in second-hand bookstores, running her fingers across spines of novels she couldn't yet read. She even sketched in her journal, a habit she had abandoned years ago, scribbling details of faces, voices, and fleeting conversations. But each page seemed to carry a shadow, the presence of a man whose name she did not know. One afternoon, while sipping coffee outside a cafe, she caught sight of him again, seated across the street. He wasn't looking at her directly this time, but she felt the connection like static. When she shifted in her chair, pretending to check her phone, his eyes flicked up, quick, sharp, undeniable. The world around her blurred, the clinking cups, the hum of traffic, the chatter of couples, and all she could hear was the rush of her own breath. She sank-owed abruptly, her chair scraping against stone. But when she looked again, the chair across the street was empty. That night, she lay awake, her balcony door ajar to let in the cool air. The street below was quiet, but her thoughts were not. She told herself she was being paranoid, that cities always had watchers and wanderers, people who seemed familiar until they melted into the crowd. Still, as she drifted toward sleep, she couldn't shake the sense that Paris, the city she had chosen for its promise of anonymity, was beginning to notice her. Paris taught Anya that even strangers could become confidants, if only for a night. It was a city that thrived on fleeting connections, on conversations whispered in cafes and forgotten by morning. Yet some of those encounters carved themselves into memory, lingering longer than they should. That was how she met Leah, a French student with messy blonde curls, chipped nail polish, and a laugh that seemed to tumble out without warning. They collided in the cramped aisle of a bookstore near Montmartre, both reaching for the same poetry collection. Instead of awkward silence, Leah teased, "Looks like we share good taste." It was the kind of line that might have dissolved quickly, but Leah lingered, and within minutes, they were talking as though they had always known each other. For Anya, Leah became a small anchor in a city that felt too wide, too indifferent. The two began meeting often, sometimes for long walks, sometimes for coffee, and eventually for wine. One evening they sat tucked in a dimly lit bar on Rue des Abbesses. A record spun in the background, low and soulful, the kind of music that encouraged confession. Their glasses clinked, crimson liquid catching the light, and for the first time since leaving India, Anya felt her guard lower. "Your French is getting better," Leah said with a grin, swirling her glass. "Barely," Anya laughed, cheeks warm from the wine. "People still answer me in English the moment I try." "Don't worry. Paris forgives mistakes if you charm it enough." The line made Anya smile, but behind her laughter was the weight of silence she had been carrying since boarding the plane. That silence cracked open as Leah leaned closer, her eyes bright with curiosity. "So, why Paris, really? You don't seem like someone running from nothing." The words struck deep. Anya hesitated, fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. Leah's gaze was not prying but patient, the kind that waited for truths to surface. And Anya, vulnerable from loneliness and the comfort of red wine, let the words spill. She spoke of her family back home, the suffocating expectations, the whispered judgments of relatives. She revealed the broken engagement, a match made to please tradition rather than her own heart. She described how her refusal had been met with cold silence, with disappointment that clung to her like smoke. "I just couldn't do it," she whispered, eyes downcast. "Marry someone I didn't love. Stay in a life that wasn't mine. So I left." Leia reached across the table, covering her hand briefly. "That's brave, Anya. To choose yourself." The words soothed, but they also stung. Was it bravery or recklessness? She didn't know. Yet beneath the heaviness, another truth ached to be spoken. A truth she had not even admitted to herself fully. Her lips parted before she could stop them. "There's someone new." Leia's brows lifted, a slow smile tugging at her lips. "Oh, that didn't take long." Anya laughed nervously, shaking her head. "It's not like that. We don't really know each other. Not yet." She hesitated, glancing toward the shadowed corners of the bar as though he might materialize there. "But he's different. Unexpected." She didn't mention the watchful eyes, the way he seemed to appear and disappear in rhythm with her days. Instead, she framed it as a secret, a fragile beginning she wasn't ready to name. "Sometimes," Anya whispered, "it feels like he sees me more than anyone ever has." The admission hung between them, charged, dangerous. Leia leaned back, studying her as though deciding whether to laugh it off or press for details, but she only raised her glass again. "Then here's to Paris, and to secrets worth keeping." Their glasses met, the sound sharp in the dim room. Anya smiled, but unease rippled beneath her chest. She had shared more than she intended, more than she should have. Later, walking home through the narrow streets, the night air cool against her flushed cheeks, she replayed the conversation. Had she betrayed herself? Or was it relief, to finally say aloud what had been gnawing at her? Behind her, footsteps echoed faintly on the cobblestones. She told herself it was only another passerby. Yet when she turned the key in her apartment door, she couldn't shake the thought that her confession had set something in motion, something she couldn't take back. Anya told herself she was imagining it. The footsteps, the flicker of movement at the edge of her vision, the sense that eyes lingered on her longer than they should. Paris was crowded, alive, restless. Strangers brushing past one another was the pulse of the city. But that night, after confiding in Leia, the certainty deepened. Someone was watching her. Days passed before he finally revealed himself. It was late afternoon near the Place du Tertre, the square where artists spread their easels, coaxing faces from canvas while tourists circled in fascination. Anya stood beneath the shade of a cafe awning, sipping coffee and pretending to study the sketches. That was when she saw him again, no longer a shadow across the street, but close enough to blur the distance. He was older than she expected, perhaps in his late 30s, with sharp features that seemed carved rather than born. His dark hair held the faintest trace of gray at the temples, a detail that lent him both distinction and mystery. When he caught her gaze, he did not look away. Instead, he smiled, measured, knowing, as though he had been waiting for this moment. "Enjoying Paris?" His voice was deep, smooth, threaded with an accent she couldn't quite place. Anya blinked, startled, her coffee trembling slightly in her hand. I suppose." He stepped closer, careful, unhurried. "Forgive me. I noticed you before. You move through this city as though searching for something." The comment unsettled her. She forced a laugh, masking the unease with polite dismissal. "Or maybe I'm just lost. Tourists always look that way." But his eyes lingered too long, reading beneath her words. "No, not lost. Untethered." The word struck her like a chord, echoing truths she hadn't spoken aloud. She studied him cautiously, every instinct whispering warning, yet curiosity rooted her in place. "I'm Julienne," he said finally, extending a hand. "And you are—" "Anya." He repeated her name slowly, deliberately, as though tasting it. "Beautiful. Uncommon." The compliment, though soft, felt weighted. She drew her hand back a fraction too quickly. Over the following days, Julienne appeared again, at a cafe terrace, near the metro steps, outside a gallery she visited on impulse. Always casual, always coincidental, as though fate, not design, drew them together. And yet beneath his charm, a current of possession tugged at his words. "You should be careful walking alone at night," he remarked one evening as they strolled near the Seine. "Paris is not always kind to young women, especially those far from home." The way he said it, protective, almost intimate, made her skin prickle. She forced a smile. "I can manage." "I'm sure you can," Julienne replied, eyes narrowing slightly. "But why should you have to? You deserve someone watching over you." The intensity behind his gaze left her both flattered and uneasy. No man had ever studied her with such relentless focus, as though she were a puzzle only he could solve. He asked questions that cut too close, about her fam, Eiley, her broken engagement, her reasons for leaving. Each answer she offered seemed to feed his hunger for more. One evening, seated across from him in a quiet bistro, she caught herself leaning forward, drawn in by the depth of his stories. Tales of travel, art, and philosophy spoken with the cadence of a man who had lived too many lives. Yet even as his words flowed, his eyes never softened. They pinned her, sharp as glass, reminding her that beneath the allure, there was something harder, less forgiving. "Anya," he murmured, his hand brushing the edge of her sleeve. "You are different. Most people chase illusions. You—" His smile deepened, almost predatory. "You are an illusion worth chasing." Her breath caught. Compliment or warning? She couldn't decide. That night, as she returned alone to her apartment, her thoughts spiraled. Julienne was captivating, yes. But his presence pressed against her, filling spaces she hadn't invited him into. His interest felt less like chance and more like design, as though he had been studying her long before he spoke her name. Standing at her window, gazing out over the dimly lit street, she caught a flicker of movement below. A man leaned against a lamppost, cigarette glowing faintly in the dark. Her heart raced. Was it him? She couldn't be sure. But even as she pulled the curtains shut, she knew one thing with cold certainty. Julienne was no longer a shadow. He was part of her story now, and she wasn't sure if that was salvation or the beginning of something far more dangerous. The glow of her laptop screen was the only light in the room. Paris hummed faintly outside, muffled by the old shutters of her Montmartre apartment. Anya sat curled on the edge of her bed, fingers poised above the keyboard, heart heavy with the words she could not say aloud. She began simply, "Dee, I don't know what I'm doing here anymore." Her sister's name, the word die, felt like a lifeline. Back home, her older sister had always been the one to steady her, during Skuden, exams, after heartbreaks, even in the heated arguments with their parents over Anya's independence. Now, thousands of miles away, Anya typed into the void, knowing the email would never be sent. She poured herself into the words. She wrote about Julienne, the way he appeared in her life like a character from a novel, offering charm and protection but leaving her unsettled. She described how his compliments sometimes felt like chains, how his questions sliced too deep. "He looks at me like I'm something he owns," she confessed in one draft, "and sometimes I catch myself letting him." Her hands trembled as she typed. Was it fear she felt, or was it the dangerous thrill of being desired so completely? Delete, retype, save as draft. She never clicked send. In another letter, she admitted her shame. The broken engagement, the whispers of relatives back in Delhi, the pressure to prove she wasn't weak for leaving. "If you knew about Julianne, you would judge me too," she wrote, blinking back tears. "But I can't let go. I'm scared of what that says about me." The drafts stacked up in her inbox like ghosts, half-formed confessions no one would ever read. Each unsent message was a mirror, reflecting her growing isolation. Nights blurred together, wine glasses left half-finished on the table, the city lights outside mocking her solitude. She tried to imagine her sister's reply if she ever pressed send. Would Di scold her? Beg her to come home? Or would she simply say what Anya most feared, that she had walked willingly into her own undoing? One evening, after Julianne stormed out of her apartment over something trivial, a missed call, a delayed reply, Anya opened her laptop again. Her hands moved furiously, words spilling like blood from a wound. "He frightens me sometimes. His anger is sudden, sharp. The other night he gripped my wrist too hard. He apologized after, said he only wanted me to understand him. But what if that's only the beginning?" Her chest tightened as she typed it. For the first time, the fear on the page felt real. Solid, irrefutable. She hovered over the send button. Her finger shook. And then, as always, she closed the laptop. The silence that followed was louder than any argument, heavier than any confession. She lay awake in the dark, her mind circling the words trapped inside those drafts, letters unsent, truths unspoken, warnings unheeded. Outside her window, the street lamps flickered, casting shadows that seemed to press closer. Somewhere in the night, Anya imagined footsteps, steady, patient, familiar. Whether real or imagined, she no longer knew. The emails remained locked away, unsent, but they were there, waiting, a testament to her doubts, her guilt, her growing fear. And in their silence, they whispered a single truth. Some secrets, left unspoken, could become the sharpest knives. The drafts remained unsent, sealed inside her laptop like bottled confessions. But 60 days after stepping off her flight to Paris, the words she never spoke became all that was left of her. It began quietly. One morning, her neighbors noticed her shutters closed, the faint hum of her music gone. Anya's presence, her soft footsteps in the stairwell, the polite greetings in accented French, vanished as if the city itself had swallowed her whole. The building's concierge was the first to speak of it. She remembered hearing muffled voices 2 nights before, low and heated, followed by the sharp slam of a door. It was late, she told police later. Too late for visitors. Another tenant claimed they heard footsteps racing down the corridor, then silence that stretched long into the early hours. Inside her apartment, the clues told a story both hurried and incomplete. A half-packed suitcase sat open on the bed, clothes folded but scattered, as if abandoned mid-motion. On the dresser lay a broken necklace, its chain snapped clean through, a single pendant resting on the wood. The laptop remained closed, as though guarding the truths Anya never shared. The police noted every detail: a wine glass still smudged with fingerprints, a chair toppled slightly off balance, a faint scuff on the floor near the doorframe, suggesting resistance, but no blood, no sign of forced entry. Julianne's name surfaced almost immediately. Neighbors had seen him come and go, his tall frame unmistakable, his intensity difficult to miss. Some recalled arguments drifting through the thin apartment walls, his voice sharp, hers quieter, pleading. Others admitted they had chosen not to listen too closely. Paris was a city of secrets. One learned to look away. Her landlord described Anya as punctual with rent, polite but reserved. "She kept to herself," he said. "But I did notice she seemed unsettled lately. Nervous." He mentioned seeing her with Julianne more often, though their connection remained undefined. Friend, lover, something more sinister? He could not say. The missing person report was filed with the Paris police. Officers visited the apartment, photographed the broken necklace, bagged the suitcase as evidence, and questioned the building's tenants. Their tone remained professional, detached, almost procedural, as though Anya were simply one among dozens of disappearances filed that month. But to those who had noticed her presence, the shy smile in the stairwell, the sound of her laughter echoing faintly down the corridor, the silence that followed was deafening. Rumors spread quickly, whispered in cafes and stairwells. Some suggested she had left by choice, running from a shadowed past. Others insisted something darker had taken place, pointing to the broken chain, the arguments, the lingering figure of the older man. For Anya's family back in India, the news came like a storm. Their last contact had been weeks earlier. A hurried phone call filled with reassurances she was fine, happy, building a life. Now they received a message from authorities thousands of miles away. Their daughter was gone, her trail broken in a foreign city. The police opened an official investigation, but their efforts moved slowly. Paris was vast, and a single young woman could vanish into its veins without leaving much trace. Still, her abandoned belongings painted a chilling picture. Someone had left in haste, whether by force or choice. And in the emptiness of her apartment, the broken necklace glimmered like a silent witness, fragile proof of a struggle. The unsent emails sat hidden inside her laptop, unread confessions of fear, longing, and doubt. Clues that, if discovered, might reveal the storm she had been trapped in before the night swallowed her whole. For now, the unanswered question lingered. Had Anya walked away from her own life, or had someone taken it from her? The broken necklace, the half-packed suitcase, the silence in her apartment. These were the details that mattered. But Paris, restless and hungry, preferred stories over facts. Within days of Anya's disappearance, her name had already slipped into the newspapers, twisted into speculation, swallowed by gossip that traveled faster than truth. The first article appeared in a local daily. "Missing Indian student in Montmartre," the headline read, accompanied by a grainy photograph of Anya smiling shyly at a cafe table. The article hinted at mystery, suggesting she may have been the victim of a crime. But by the next day, other outlets had seized the narrative, reshaping it to fit whatever angle would draw eyes. Some painted her as a tragic figure, a young woman alone in a foreign city, vulnerable and naive. Others implied darker motives. Perhaps she had staged her own disappearance, running away with a lover, seeking freedom from family expectations. A few even whispered suicide, citing the pressures of culture, loneliness, and the shadow of rejection. Each story left fingerprints of judgment, none rooted in certainty. Julian's name surfaced quickly. Neighbors' testimonies placed him at her door, his voice raised in anger on more than one night. Yet when questioned, he stood tall before cameras, his expression controlled, his words carefully chosen. "She was only an acquaintance," he said, voice steady, eyes unblinking. "I met her a few times. Yes, but I was not involved. This is a tragedy, but I know little more than you." But witnesses remembered differently. Cafe owners near Montmartre recalled seeing them together, his hand brushing hers, their conversations long and heated. One bartender swore he'd seen them leave together, late into the night, her laughter trailing into the street. Another claimed Julienne was possessive, glaring at any man who looked her way. Still, he denied it all. And in the absence of clear proof, the press filled the gaps with insinuation. "Perhaps she was reckless," one headline suggested. "A woman of two worlds, tradition and temptation." The phrase echoed online, shared in comment sections, dissected by strangers who knew nothing of her life. To many, Anya became less a missing person and more a symbol, of culture clashes, of forbidden love, of a woman judged for daring to choose differently. Her family in India read these stories with horror. For them, the pain doubled. Not only was their daughter gone, but now her name was dragged through a storm of cultural judgment. Messages flooded their phones from relatives, acquaintances, even strangers, each carrying whispers of blame. She was too bold. She should never have gone alone. This is what happens when tradition is ignored. In Paris, the police struggled to keep the case grounded in facts. They issued brief statements, urging calm, insisting the investigation was ongoing. But their detachment only fed the public's appetite for rumor. Every cafe corner, every online forum buzzed with theories. Some imagined her body lying in the Seine, a victim of crime. Others pictured her boarding a train south, running away with a secret lover. Still others believed she had simply broken under the weight of expectation, vanishing into the night of her own will. For Julien, the scrutiny grew unbearable. His name was whispered in cafes, printed in tabloids, tossed around on radio talk shows. He was followed, photographed, analyzed. His denial only seemed to fuel suspicion. Why deny so forcefully if there was nothing to hide? And yet he carried himself with calm precision, as though every word had been rehearsed. To some, that calmness was proof of innocence. To others, it was evidence of guilt. Meanwhile, the rumors changed something else, something subtle, corrosive. Anya's voice, her truth, was buried beneath layers of stereotype and speculation. No one asked what she might have wanted, what fears she confessed only to herself in unsent letters. Instead, she was rewritten by strangers, naive, rebellious, doomed. Her story was no longer hers. It belonged to Paris now, its journalists, its gossips, its watchers in the dark. But beneath the noise, the investigation pressed forward quietly. Detectives gathered receipts, traced her last phone calls, questioned Julien again and again, and one unanswered question lingered, sharper than the rest. If she had run, where had she gone? If she had been taken, who still held the truth? The weight of rumor became the smoke that clouded the case, but behind it, something real remained, evidence waiting to be uncovered. And soon, that evidence would drag both Anya's family and the Parisian authorities deeper into a truth more twisted than gossip could imagine. The gossip had painted its own story, but detectives knew rumor could not stand as evidence. They needed something concrete, something that could hold weight in court. And slowly, threads began to appear, small details that, when woven together, revealed the faint outline of a darker truth. The first breakthrough came Rome, a corner bar near Pigalle. Surveillance cameras, grainy but functional, had captured a familiar figure. There was Anya, her hair loose around her shoulders, wearing the pale dress neighbors had described, stepping out into the night. She wasn't alone. At her side, hand grazing her arm, was Julien. The timestamp read 11:42 p.m., the night before she vanished. The footage silenced some of Julien's claims, but it also complicated things. He had denied any intimacy, insisting she was little more than an acquaintance. Yet here they were, walking together, their closeness undeniable. Detectives replayed the tape again and again, noting her smile, his grip, the way he looked over his shoulder as though scanning for eyes that shouldn't be watching. From there, financial records painted another story. In the weeks leading up to her disappearance, Anya's bank account showed unusual withdrawals. Small amounts at first, 40 euros here, 60 there. But as the days wore on, the numbers grew larger, more erratic. Hundreds withdrawn in cash, sometimes twice a day, leaving her balance thin. Hotel receipts surfaced next, tucked under her name. They weren't the grand establishments near the Seine, but modest ones, scattered across the outskirts of the city. The dates aligned with the cash withdrawals, and yet, in every case, the stays were brief. 1 night, never 2. She had signed in alone, but the desk clerks remembered otherwise. "A man," one said. "Tall, dark hair. He didn't sign, but he was with her." Julienne's shadow loomed over every piece. The puzzle was forming, but it wasn't yet whole. Was this an affair that spiraled into danger? Or had Anya been coerced, trapped in something she couldn't escape? The police pressed Julienne again. His answers grew sharper, less rehearsed. "She was lonely," he said, finally admitting to more than acquaintance. "Yes, we saw each other, but it was nothing serious. She wanted to experience life. She was reckless." His words, cold and dismissive, left detectives uneasy. He positioned himself as a bystander to her supposed chaos, yet too many traces tied him to her final days. Then came the voice from India. Raj, Anya's cousin, arrived in Paris like a storm. Unlike her parents, who were paralyzed by grief and shame, Raj demanded answers with a fierce determination. He marched into the precinct, his voice raised, his hands trembling with restrained fury. "My cousin would not disappear like this," he insisted, slamming a photograph of her on the desk. "You say she was reckless? No, she was brave, she was kind. If she is gone, someone did this to her. Find him. Find Julienne." The detectives, weary of tabloid noise and political whispers, felt a shift with Raj's presence. His words cut through speculation, grounding the case in something raw and human. Anya wasn't a symbol, wasn't a headline. She was flesh, blood, laughter, ambition. She was family. Raj retraced her steps himself, walking through Montmartre, standing outside the bars she once visited, speaking with shopkeepers who remembered her face. His grief was sharp, but so was his instinct. He saw connections the press ignored, details others overlooked. And in one conversation, with a hotel clerk who swore she'd seen Anya trembling, clutching her purse as though afraid to let go, Raj felt the truth stirring. Something had happened behind those closed doors, something more than loneliness or recklessness. The puzzle was not yet solved, but its pieces were no longer scattered. They were tightening around Julienne, around the nights he wished to erase. And soon, another discovery would drag the case into darker territory, one that even Raj was not prepared to face. Raj had never been the type to hold his tongue, and the mounting evidence left him restless. The hotel clerk's testimonies, the surveillance footage, the bank withdrawals, all of it circled back to one man. Julienne had woven himself into Anya's life, and now he stood at the center of her disappearance. Raj wanted answers, not excuses. He found Julienne outside a cafe in the 11th arrondissement, cigarette in hand, eyes scanning the street as though expecting someone. Raj approached with deliberate steps, anger tightening his jaw. Julienne looked up, smirk curling at the edges of his lips. "You must be the cousin," Julienne said, his tone casual, dismissive. "I want the truth," Raj demanded. "You were with her the night she vanished. Don't lie to me. I've seen the footage, the hotels, everything." Julienne exhaled smoke, leaning back in his chair. Ah, the protective family man. Always so certain, so righteous. You think Paris is simple? People come and go. Sometimes they don't want to be found. Raj's fists clenched. "She wasn't running. She was afraid of you. What did you do to her?" For a moment, Julienne's mask slipped. His eyes hardened, voice sharpening with quiet menace. "Careful, boy. You don't know me. And you don't know her as well as you think. She wanted more than your small village morality could ever give her." The words stung, but beneath them Raj caught something else, a flicker of defensiveness, an edge of fear. Julienne was hiding something. The confrontation ended with Julien rising abruptly, stubbing out his cigarette and brushing past Raj with a final whisper, "If she's gone, it's because she chose to be." The sentence lingered, a cruel taunt that felt more like a threat than an explanation. While Raj battled with rage, the investigation took an unexpected turn. Leia, the French student who had once shared wine and laughter with Anya, stepped forward. She walked into the police station clutching a folder, her face pale, her hands trembling. Inside were emails Anya had written, letters addressed to her sister back in India. None of them had ever been sent. Detectives scanned the pages, the words unraveling a story more intimate and more chilling than the financial records or hotel receipts. Anya's confessions spilled out in fragments. "Julien can be so charming, but sometimes I feel like he's watching every move I make. He hates when I go out without him. I don't tell him everything, but he always finds out. I don't know how. It's like he has eyes everywhere. There are moments when he is kind, gentle even. Then suddenly he changes, sharp, angry, accusing me of things I haven't done." Each letter was a plea wrapped in hesitation, a diary of fear masked as confession. She hadn't sent them, perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of the hope things would improve, but they laid bare the cycle she had been caught in, a whirlwind of affection and control, love and intimidation. The detectives exchanged grim looks. To them, these letters transformed the narrative. Anya wasn't reckless, wasn't simply lost in a foreign city. She was a woman trapped in the tightening grip of obsession. Raj read the pages in silence, his chest heavy with grief and fury. Every word felt like a knife, each confession a window into the torment his cousin had carried alone. His suspicion of Julien hardened into certainty. Still, questions remained. If Anya had feared him, why had she continued to see him? Was it hope, desperation, or something darker, manipulation so deep she couldn't escape? As detectives pinned the letters to their growing board of evidence, the case took on new urgency. No longer just a missing persons mystery, it now hinted at coercion, control, and perhaps violence. Raj, clutching the folder, vowed quietly, "I won't let her voice be lost in these fragments. I'll make sure the truth comes out." And as if to answer that vow, another lead was already forming, one that would drag Julien's carefully guarded past into the light. The knock on Julien's apartment door came at dawn. Blue lights flickered across the narrow Parisian street as officers swarmed the stairwell. Julien opened the door in a half-buttoned shirt, his eyes still heavy with sleep, though his smirk never faded. Raj stood a few steps away, watching, his fists clenched as the man was read his rights. The sound of handcuffs snapping into place echoed like justice long overdue. Charges spilled from the officers' mouths: coercion, fraud, suspected foul play. Though the word murder had not been formally spoken, it lingered in the air like smoke. Neighbors leaned from their windows, whispering, while Julien was escorted into the waiting van. Raj exhaled, a tremor running through him. It wasn't victory, it was only the beginning. Weeks later, the courthouse became the stage for a reckoning. The marble floors and vaulted ceilings carried an air of gravity. Yet for Raj, it felt like stepping into a theater where truth and lies would battle under unforgiving lights. Reporters lined the corridors, scribbling notes as cameras flashed. The name Anya Sharma now floated across headlines worldwide. Her absence transformed into spectacle. Inside, Julien sat at the defendant's table, impeccably dressed in a dark suit. He looked less like a man accused of crimes and more like a businessman attending a negotiation. His composure was unnerving, his gaze occasionally sweeping across the room to lock with Raj's, daring him to falter. The prosecution wasted no time. Bank statements appeared on screens, transfers made from Anya's account to Julien's under loans that were never repaid. Hotel receipts tied them together in nights of secrecy, and surveillance footage painted the shadow of intimacy she had never dared to confess openly. But the most damning evidence lay in Leah's hands. The young woman took the stand, clutching Anya's unsent letters. Her voice trembled as she read aloud. "He says he loves me, but sometimes it feels like a cage. I don't know who I am when I'm with him anymore." Or, gasps rippled through the courtroom. For Raj, every word was both unbearable and necessary. These were the fragments of Anya's voice, now given the power to indict the man who had silenced her. Julian's lawyer objected, painting Anya as a troubled dreamer, reckless and unstable. She was running from her family, her traditions, her failed engagement, the defense argued. Julian offered her freedom. If she disappeared, it was her choice, not his crime. But cracks showed in Julian's mask when cross-examined. Questions about his past surfaced. Other women who had filed complaints of financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, sudden disappearances from his life. His charm thinned into irritation, his calm into flashes of contempt. Raj sat through it all, his emotions a storm barely contained. Each revelation was a knife, yet also a thread binding the truth together. He could feel Anya's absence heavier than ever. The trial was exposing the predator, yes, but it wasn't bringing her back. The judge's gavel struck sharply as proceedings closed for the day. Julianne was ordered into custody, pending sentencing. Outside, journalists swarmed, demanding sound bites. Raj spoke only once. "We don't know where Anya is, but we know what he did to her, and that's where justice begins." That night, Raj lay awake in his hotel room, the city outside alive with sirens and distant laughter. Justice, he realized, was not clean. It was fractured, painful, often incomplete. Julian's guilt was clear, yet the question remained like a ghost. Where was Anya? Was she lost forever, or waiting somewhere to be found? The courtroom had stripped Julianne's illusions bare, but the next step would reach beyond legal battles, into the darker corners where truth and fate still hid. The trial ended, but the story refused to die. Months later, Anya's name still echoed across the pages of newspapers and television debates, stretching far beyond the walls of the Paris courtroom. Some called her a victim of predatory love. Others whispered she had been a runaway chasing freedom. Headlines bled with contradictions. Lost in love or stolen by deception. The Indian girl who vanished in Paris. Each article seemed less about truth and more about shaping myth. Raj followed the coverage obsessively at first. Each morning in his small Paris hotel room, he unfolded the newspaper with trembling hands, searching for clarity in print. But clarity never came. Even after Julianne's sentencing for financial fraud and coercion, the legal verdict offered no answers about Anya's ultimate fate. The absence of her body, her voice, her choice, left a gaping wound words could not close. Reporters swarmed Raj whenever he appeared outside. "Do you believe she's alive? Did she plan it? Was Julianne lying?" Their questions blurred into noise, each one cutting deeper. He wanted to shout, "She was more than your headlines. She was my family." But the cameras were merciless, twisting every syllable into spectacle. So Raj stayed silent, his grief folded into the corners of his eyes, his only rebellion against a world that wanted to consume her story. Eventually, he packed her belongings, the broken necklace, the half-written emails, the suitcase that had waited for her hands to return. The weight of the bag was nothing compared to the weight it pressed into his chest. When he boarded the flight back to India, he carried her absence like a passenger beside him. Home welcomed him with the familiar heat and scent of spices in the air, yet nothing felt familiar. His relatives gathered in hushed clusters, whispering about Anya. Some saw her as a cautionary tale, proof of what happens when tradition is defied. Others wept quietly, remembering her laughter, her restless spirit. Raj noticed how everyone had their version of her, yet none had the full truth. She had become both Saint A and sinner, martyr, and rebel, depending on who was speaking. In the quiet of his own room, Raj spread her letters across the floor. The ones she never sent. The words she never shared. They spoke of fear, longing, the suffocation of expectation, and the fire of wanting more. He traced her handwriting with his fingers, feeling as though each curve of ink carried her heartbeat. For a fleeting moment, he could almost hear her laugh again. At night, Raj walked the narrow streets of his hometown, listening to the distant hum of scooters, the chatter of neighbors, the world moving on as though she had never existed. Yet for him, every sound was muted, wrapped in the echo of her absence. He realized then that grief wasn't only about losing someone. It was also about losing the certainty of who they truly were. One morning, as he folded the final newspaper clipping into a drawer, Raj understood something. Anya no longer belonged only to him or his family. She belonged to the stories people told, the myths they created, the spaces between truth and imagination. The silence of what remained unsolved was louder than any verdict. Still, as he closed the drawer, he whispered into the still air, "Wherever you are, Anya, may you have found peace." The world outside his window carried on. Vendors called out, children played, headlines shifted to new scandals. But in Raj's heart, the echoes remained, love and betrayal, truth and myth, woven inseparably together. And in that silence, her shadow endured,